For good or ill, your brain's a messy place. That's good news because it means that we are constantly being influenced by factors that we don't anticipate. It's bad news because we establish habits, and those habits are hard to break. So I want to talk about how we can understand what our brain's doing, how we can change the habits we have, and potentially influence other people. This work is from my new book, Immersion, which I saw back on the shelf. So if you have to find out more, that's the place to go, and you can find me online for more questions. We're influenced by other people. You know that. You're aware. But because the brain is such an energy hog, it behaves in a very lazy way. Yes, Chris, I'm talking to you. No, right? So we establish these pathways because they're very efficient ways to process information. So if I want to influence Chris or somebody else, then I've got to break through those established pathways. So our brain is really an exquisite cost-benefit calculator. I don't want to spend too much energy on this information, this new experience, if I don't think it's going to be sufficiently valuable to me. So our job as people who want to influence behavior is to convince the brain, convince the human that this is such a powerful event, this information is so important that I should lean into it. I should actually spend the metabolic energy to process that information, and if I do that, I have a greater chance of being influenced by it. So these default pathways in the brain manifest as habits, right? And some of those are very efficient. If you know what kind of laundry detergent you like, and you go in the store, you don't have to think about it, you just buy it. As long as the price is within some reasonable range, right? No big deal, just buy it. Where this fails is when we get into biased behaviors or maladaptive behaviors, right? I'm doing something that's not effective for me, or people tell me, hey, don't do these things. So you probably have all had this experience, if you're my age or a little bit younger, of the yelling boss. Used to be a thing, like in the 80s. Your boss would scream at you. I hate the yelling boss. I think it's inappropriate. If you're having an emotional crisis, don't take it out on me, dude. Deal with it yourself. Whenever I worked in those places, I would just watch my watch. Oh, man, it's 5 o'clock. I got to get me another job. I don't like being yelled at. Not appropriate, right? And so that is, fear is a good short-term motivator, but a very poor long-term motivator. So we think about those behavioral habits. That's where executive coaching comes in, right? That's a bad behavior, right? Influences other people. Oh, that screen's so exciting. Okay. And yet, we'll never have perfect predictability of human behavior because of this inherent randomness in the firing of the neurons in the brain. And that firing has to do with housekeeping, kind of keeping pathways open in the brain. And so as you'll see, we're able to predict behavior using neuroscience in the high 90% range consistently, but we'll never get to 100. And that 98, 97% only applies on average, doesn't apply to you as an individual, right? Those predictions are on average. And yet, we have to think about how we might, as human beings, for the good of other people, influence them. And that's what we do with social creatures. We influence others all the time. We can call that influence, we can call it persuasion. I'm okay with all those words. But as social creatures, we are fascinated by what the other humans are doing. That's why we're here at Nudgestock. And yet, we're also stuck in our own little route. So how do I get you out of this task and over here? Right? I've got to, again, get you in a point where I can actually have you expend the metabolic energy to process the information that I am sharing with you. And if you are tired or hungry or just had a fight with your partner, all those things take a lot of energy in the prefrontal cortex, this executive area of the brain, and diminish the amount of metabolic energy you can apply to this information, this new situation you're in. So as a result, the brilliant organizers of Nudgestock are going to demonstrate this effect on you right now. You all had lunch. Your bellies are full, and your brain is spending a bunch of energy processing all information, so you're tired. So the word for that, the technical word is postprandial somnolescence. That means after you eat, you'll get tired. So you're burning some bandwidth on that. Now, the last session before lunch, people were hungry, burning bandwidth. Oh gosh, my stomach's grumbling, I'm hungry. So we want to get people in a state in which we can influence them effectively. So how do we do that? The first thing is to actually measure and don't ask. because of the majority of brain activity is in fact unconscious, if I ask you why you did something, which we do all the time, people will make something up because we ask them. It's like asking me how much I like, I'm looking for a prop, how much I like this book on 1 to 7. Compared to what? Compared to my kids? Forget my kids, they talk back to me. Care about my dog? My dog's perfect. My dog's a 10. Right? So, if I have to give you a number, I will, but it's really those unconscious brain processes that capture with real fidelity the way our brain values a situation or a piece of information that we're in. So we can now measure brain activity at millisecond frequency scale. The question is, what should I measure? I should measure something on the screen, but I have no ability to do that. We'll just keep talking, you guys. It's all good.
Paul, excuse me, sorry, we are working behind the scenes to get the screen back on. Further back into the room, we can see your slides on the monitors above the roof.
Okay, we'll keep going, you guys. So the first thing is we've got to capture your attention. I can do that lots of ways. The yelling boss knew how to do it. I can clap my hands, I can make a loud noise. So I've got to do something that takes you out of idle mode, saving energy, cruising my lazy, lazy brain, and into engagement mode. Right? So this attentional response is associated with the brain's binding of a neurochemical called dopamine to the prefrontal cortex, this area of conscious control. So if you or one of your kids has ADD, those meds for ADD, like Ritalin, Adderall, increase dopamine binding to the prefrontal cortex. That's how it increases attention. Okay, so attention is just the sufficient condition to influence your behavior, right? I need to get your attention, but I've actually got to get something more than that. So I think often we pray to the false god of attention. I got clicks. This is awesome. This is working perfectly. But did it influence behavior? That's the question I've been asking for the last 20 years. What are the underlying signals from the brain that capture behavior? So the first thing, I've got to get your attention, that conscious attention. And attention is very much a kind of a 0-1 signal. I can attend to Chris. I can attend to my friend John. I can't do both. Right? So unconscious attention, we're doing all kinds of things, but this is conscious attention. How do I get you to pay attention to this thing? And I love that term in English, pay attention. That's exactly what it is. It's a metabolic cost. The second thing is I have to have you give a shit about what's going on, right? So how do I do that? Right? So we've heard a little about oxytocin this morning, so another neurochemical made in the brain, only in mammals, that captures the emotional value that we get from experiences. So if I get you to attend to something and I can get you to care about it, this interesting dance between dopamine and oxytocin capture the value that my brain's getting from the experience. And when that value is higher, I'm more likely to be influenced by it. So I've called this neurologic state immersion. This is that combination of attention and emotional resonance, dopamine and oxytocin. And we can take signals for immersion and convolve them, combine them in ways to maximize predictive accuracy. So in my lab in the last 10 years or so, we've taken these signals out of the cranial nerves and then combined them so that we have the best predictor of what humans are doing. So this combined measure immersion uses natural data, but it does unnatural things to it. Right? So it turns out that when you combine these signals, because the brain's very nonlinear, you capture not only what individuals are likely to do, but you actually can capture what markets will do. So we can capture what many, many individuals will do because these signals come deep from the brainstem and they're very well conserved across individuals. So I've got 35, 40 people have this response. I'm likely to get hundreds of thousands or millions to have this similar kind of response. So you think of immersion kind of like tension in a story, right? We build stories with a narrative arc with tension. And when we put tension into your brain, we put immersion into your brain, people want to dissipate that tension by doing something, right? So if I can tell you an immersive tale, and that tale is sufficiently valuable to your brain, and there's a call to action in there, I've captured you. At least for a short period of time, maybe a couple of minutes, I've captured you. So think of this as your wonderful, sweet, elderly mother or grandmother with her rolling pin. Now you do this thing. That's what immersion is in your brain, right? It's just nagging you in a very nice way, kind of in a sweet, loving way, but also nagging you. Do this thing, do this thing, do this thing. So now if you give me a very immersive, let's say commercial, I see that on TV, and now when I go in the store and I see the same font in an end cap, I see the same picture of the big baby with big eyes for diapers. Right? All that comes back, and I get to relive that immersive experience because my brain said, oh, this is so valuable to you. Right? So that's what we're trying to do, is influence people by thinking smartly and or measuring how to create sufficient value in the brain so that we can guide people towards an action they can take. Can't coerce you. We'll come back to this is non-coercion. Again, as social creatures, we're always trying to influence each other. So if we're going to do that, let's do it effectively. Okay, so I could be wrong. It's possible. I've been wrong once or twice, no, more than that. So when we started doing this commercially, all this works in the lab beautifully, by the way. But then companies started coming with suitcases full of money to my lab and saying, hey, we've heard about you, and we'd like to make a better customer experience or better advertising or better training, corporate training. Oh my gosh, you guys have been to these things. They're awful. So we want to do that better. How do we do it? Well, we have these machines. We have 19 PhDs. And I started thinking, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just full of crap. Maybe I was lucky. There's a lot of luck in science, like in everything in the world, right? Maybe I was wrong. So I said, hey, it's close to February, the pinnacle of advertising, the Super Bowl. Why don't we measure neurologic immersion for all those 80 Super Bowl commercials and just see if we can predict which ones get the most ratings, the highest ratings. So we did that. USA Today, which is a national U.S. newspaper, for 30 years has ranked Super Bowl commercials. This is from 2018. Oh, you can't see it. If you could see the slides, or if people in the back who can see them, one of the least liked commercials on that ranking scale was a commercial for Diet Coke Groove. So this was a flavored Diet Coke. Came out early 2018. It was the most immersive commercial, but the least liked. All right, so we have to ask, how do we reconcile those two factors? So I'm going to play that commercial for you, only for the people in the back with immersion data. Okay, if we could play that. For everyone who's not watching. I don't know how to start this. Does it start on that?
Twisted mango. Because.
Imagine.
Oh. That's why. Can't help it. Hey. Still going. Maybe slowing it down. Maybe it's getting sexier. I don't know. Mango does.
So those of you who, that's all I can do. Thank you. For those of you who saw the commercial, is this weird giraffe, super tall woman who's dancing in a weird way, and she's got these weird socks on, and she's just odd. Not a likable commercial, but a very immersive commercial neurologically. So what should we believe? The self-report, USA Today, thousands of people, or the 60 people I hooked up at a bar in Claremont where I work? And in fact, you look at correlations of the self-report measures or immersion with our measure of buzz, YouTube views, YouTube comments, positive correlation for immersion, and a negative correlation for the liking variable. So whatever we're measuring somehow is capturing something that at least moves in the right direction. Does that make sense? Oh, we're back. Okay, so we're going the right direction, which is great. And again, immersion is a continuous variable coming out of the brain. I can capture it in real time. And the more immersive, the more tension I'm putting into you. And if I ask you to do something with that high tension, you want to get rid of that tension. I want to get back to baseline idle mode in my lazy brain. So how do I use all this information to be the best at influencing other people? These 5 components, a nice acronym, CERTA, like certain. So the first thing is I got to make space for you, right? Sometimes we think I want to rush. I want to get to this right away. Hey, only got an hour to do this. I got to move really fast. Slow it down. So establish what we call psychological safety. Relax a little bit. Let me get you in that mode so that you can actually take in this information. Right, so think of going to a movie theater. Noise, you're watching your phone, and then the lights come down. Right? What happens? We're preparing you for this amazing experience, right? To watch a movie in a big screen with lots of other people. So first is establish that psychological safety. The second is create an immersive experience. And the most effective way we have found to immerse individuals, full stop, is using a narrative arc. when I have characters at human scale who face a crisis, who have authentic emotions, we all understand that. We learn from that. And if I can depict that to you in a way that's meaningful, then I create an immersive experience, right? That nice narrative arc. I'm building tension. We're not running out of stories. We're still producing lots of TV and movies and novels because we are fascinated by what the other humans are doing. So use that human scale story. And then use that story, if you're trying to influence behavior, so that the story illustrates the thing you want people to do. Right? This is very much in the behavioral science, people like us kind of account. Oh, here are people, they're having a crisis, they did this thing. Oh gosh, okay, so that's one way to get out of this potential crisis I might be in. Maybe I should do that thing as well. Next, make sure that story has relevance. There's not just one great story, there's not just one behavioral science intervention, there's not one advertising campaign, there are multiple ones. So the term of art in neuroscience for this is top-down control. The top of the brain, the cortex, directs the areas that process emotion to put more energy into processing information if it's relevant to me. So that relevance comes from something I can use now. The brain is very much in the now mode. So you show me a nice commercial for Huggies diapers, babies with big eyes. If I don't have infants at home, it's just amusing. My brain flushes that out pretty quickly. But if I have infants at home and the commercial says, hey, Huggies are 10% off, valuable information for me, I'm going to be processing that with higher immersion because it's relevant. And lastly, a lot of campaigns, or second lastly, fail to engage superfans. Right? There are a lot of campaigns that are just okay, but there's a subset of individuals that we can find neurologically, but you can also find them behaviorally, that love this more than anything. All the major movie studios where I live in LA have fandom departments. They have people that will work for free to help you spread the word. So engage these superfans. Whatever you're asking them to do is a big part of their lives, and they will work on your behalf, so leverage them. And then finally, if you want that call to action to work as effectively as possible, put that call to action at an immersion peak. So oftentimes we tell a story, here's the arc, and at the very end I say, now do my thing, buy my stuff. But if you look at movie trailers, and you can do that tonight, later, those movie trailers have half of a narrative arc. They tell a story, crisis, real emotions, and then buy a ticket to find out what happens next. So from an influencing behavior perspective, how that call to action, wherever that immersion peak occurs, could occur at the end, that's fine, but nice story, now do my thing, when I've reduced the tension in that person's brain, is going to be less effective than having that call to action when that immersion peak occurs. Okay, quick example. Music was published 2 weeks ago from my group. New music people haven't heard before. We had people listen to it. Do you like it? Would you share it with other people? People self-reported ability to predict hits, 0%. When we calculate immersion, grab immersion for these individuals, put them in a linear model, 76% accuracy predicting hits. When we apply machine learning to this model, we heard about AI earlier, we can get up to 97%. Because the machine learning picks up these nonlinearities that the brain engages in all the time. So all this is working in the background. We're not aware of it, but our brains know what we value, even if we don't, consciously. And lastly, there's no brainwashing, right? Everyone has choice. This shouldn't be used for people who are too young, who are too old, who are cognitively impaired. If we're going to seek to influence people, which we always do as social creatures, then we should do it in a way that's ethical so that people have choice and they're not being coerced to do anything they don't want to do. So that is my time. Thank you so much for listening, for being awake after lunch. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes for
Yes,
some Q&A. And first of all, I just want you to share with the audience a little bit on how you're doing this measuring, because I'm hoping we're going to return to this at the end of the show. Can you explain a little bit about the technology that you're using?
Right. So the U.S. taxpayers funded my lab to the tune of about $5 million with big machines and lots of PhDs, about 10,000 blood draws to measure neurochemicals in the last 20 years. And now, because we found this neurologic state immersion, we can pull these data from a wearable, like a fitness sensor that I and some other people in the audience are wearing, by taking these data and shooting up to the cloud and using algorithms to measure this in real time. So it's really now a platform that anybody can use to figure out what the brain loves in real time.
Which is why I'm slightly terrified about when Google and Meta and maybe some of the people in this audience have access to all of that data coming through your smartwatch about where and when in the world you are most immersed and which presentation of the day you were most immersed in. We're hopefully going to return to some of that because some of you are wearing this tech at the end of the day. But we've got some questions here. So can you answer, how does oxytocin work for people's different interests and passions? How do people care more about particular subjects? Is it just more like higher release of oxytocin?
Yeah, greater release of oxytocin that we're picking up downstream. So this is kind of pulsatile release. So you're lovely and we're friendly. But when my little children come and hug me, more oxytocin, right? So it's indexing the degree to which I'm emotionally experiencing this event.
And is that genetically predestined, or is it something we can nurture into our children?
Great question. Or into ourselves. So the brain is very plastic. It's evolving all the time. So emerging work from my lab and others shows that the more we connect to others, the more oxytocin release, we get to be better humans. By the way, this works because oxytocin increases empathy. So we heard about empathy this morning. So it's really connecting us to other people and to ideas.
And people talk about it as the cuddle hormone, but my understanding is it also is the thing that will help you fight the enemy as well. Is that right? The more oxytocin,
it bonds people together. Yeah,
bonds
exactly.
people together, but it also means that if you're the out group, I'm more likely to fight you if I've got a lot of oxytocin over here.
Yes and no. So we published research a couple years ago showing that if I release oxytocin talking to you, and then I have some other people who are not super aggressive, they're just different than us, say different color skin, different gender. We talked about women's issues earlier. Once I release oxytocin, I've got about a 20-minute window where I just treat everybody really nicely.
Okay.
So I think it's really going to be connecting.
Yeah.
It is going to really help the world get to be a better place.
Is there anything that makes everyone release oxytocin? Images of babies, that kind of... Are there anything that's touch?
Touch, hug, sex, those are the best.
Okay. And static images, we talked about video, but is this predictive for static imagery, how effective it might be in the marketplace?
Great question. It is, and yet for video or audio, like Steve and Tom's description of sonic branding, we have more bandwidth hitting the brain, so it's a little more effective.
Positive and negative. Is all immersion good? Can you distinguish between positive and negative immersion?
More immersion means more likely that you're going to take an effect. If you are paying attention, but your oxytocin is low, I call that state frustration. So I'm here, I just don't dig what's going on. I'm frustrated, I'm not going to do anything.
And could you give someone oxytocin? Can you sort of dose them with oxytocin in some way? Is there a way of doing that could elicit this immersive effect? Then if I spread it out in the room in some way?
Right, so hugs, not drugs. So we have, in experimental studies and in some clinical trials, infused synthetic oxytocin into the brain via the nose. But again, we don't want to be drugging people. That would be coercive.
Puppies, if I just put a load of
Oh, a
puppies in?
ton. We've done a ton of work
Okay.
with dogs. Dogs are the most immersive thing you can do besides babies. So yeah, dogs to work, definitely.
You heard it here first, guys. Puppies in your meeting with your FD. I think that's probably all we've got time for, but we could talk all day. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Professor
guys.
Paul Zak.